This is the build video of the TLR 224 2.0 four-wheel drive 1/10 scale electric racing buggy. Now don't forget to check out the full article at RCTech.net. Alright, so it's time to assemble the shocks. Now, these shocks have got the aluminum bodies, aluminum caps, with the bleed hole, and you've got a metal screw that goes into the bleed hole, and that metal screw has a copper washer on it, which is nice because I've installed shocks, put together shocks before that either have a plastic washer or a rubber washer, and man, you get it too tight, and over time it just splits. So it's nice to see the copper washer on there because that's not going to necessarily split, and it will do the job. It'll seal it. So yeah, good job for that. These shocks also have an aluminum bottom cap. You can see the shock laying there with the bottom cap and then the shaft. The shaft holds on the pistons with two E-clips, and the pistons are machined. And on the front piston, it uses a 2x1.5, and the rear shocks use a 2x1.7 piston. Basically, that means the hole is 1.7 millimeters, and there's two of them. Now I'm just kind of cleaning out these holes here. On one of the pistons, there was a little plastic burr left in the hole. It wasn't really attached. It was just kind of stuck in there, so I wanted to make sure they were clear. And of course, there's a bunch of O-rings and everything, and those are the E-clips to hold the pistons onto the shaft. Now, I like to lay everything out before assembling it. That way I can make sure I'm going to have every part that belongs in it. I'm also doing this for a photograph for the article. And if you haven't seen the article yet, and if it's up already, because the video is released before the article, but make sure to check out the article. There's some really good photographs of each step there. And I go into a little bit more detail on some of the things. Now you can see there's that copper washer and that little bleed screw. Now these shocks do not have your typical bladder, which is found in many shocks. This is more of an emulsion shock, which is where the air will actually mix with the oil, and that's on purpose. And once it mixes really well, that's what gives you your dampening. So using these shocks, it's a good idea before a race, either to take a few warm-up laps, or if you're late getting lined up on the track, go ahead and just push your car up and down a few times to get that to mix up really well. So your first jump, you'll have sufficient dampening. Now you can see there that I've got some green slime sitting there, and I know that's not a TLR product, but you know what? I really like using that for assembling shocks. I think it does a good job of keeping them from leaking, and so yeah, I use it in assembling these shocks. Now it works best there. I'm putting on the shock end there, and what I'm using, I know I should have a shock tool. Shame on me. I mean, I really should. But what I was using is those side cutters right there, and I was gripping onto the thread of the shock shaft. Actually, you do not, under any circumstance, want to grip onto the actual shock shaft, whether you're using side cutters, you're using regular pliers. If you scratch that shock shaft, what's going to happen is as it goes in and out of the shock, it's just going to eat away at all the seals in there, and you will have leaky shocks, and you'll have to rebuild your shocks, and you actually have to get a new shock shaft. So you really don't want to chance that And so yeah, I was using that and gripping on to the very, very top of the threads there. And as the only problem using this method is, yeah, you can get them all the same exact length and stuff. That's not an issue. But what is an issue is you're going to end up with a little bit longer stroke because you don't quite get that shock end on all the way. It doesn't, because you have a tiny bit of threads that you're actually gripping with that side cutter. So those are threads that you're not actually screwing in. Okay, so you're like gonna watch me build 4 shocks, and this is gonna be pretty boring. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna tell you a joke. Okay, so here it is. This pirate walks into a bar, and he's got a parrot on one shoulder. He's got an eye patch over the other eye, and he has a steering wheel sticking out of his pants. The bartender takes one look at this pirate, and he goes, "Hey, buddy, do you know that you have a steering wheel in your pants?" And the pirate looks back at the bartender and goes, "Arr, I know. It's driving me nuts." Yeah, anyway. So I heard that joke driving down the street, and I almost ran off the road. So I hope it made you laugh. You might be sitting there going, "What? It would drive me nuts too. What?" Anyway, so back to building the buggy. Now I put a little bit of grease on the ride height adjustment collar, or the spring tension collar, and that way it'll move a little bit easier. It's got a really tight fit. It'll also protect that O-ring inside there, so it doesn't get eaten up and stuff. But yeah, that collar is on there really well. Without that grease, it's actually a little bit difficult to adjust the ride height of your buggy, the spring tension. Now, the kit does come with these tools that I'm using. Well, these tools, I'm using several tools. All right, so what the kit comes with, at the very center of the screen, you see a wrench I was using with two ears on it, if you will, that goes onto the bottom of the shock. It's got a hex on the inside. It comes with that, and then over toward the right of the green slime, a little bit down, you see 2 black tools. The shorter of the two, which looks similar to that, but instead of the hexagonal in the center, it's just kind of got a slot in the center. That is used, obviously, to go over the cap. So you can screw the caps on really tight. So the kit does come with those, and just like every other part in the kit, it is high-quality plastic, and I don't suspect it will strip out anytime soon. So I'm using a little bit of green slime there, too, just to make sure I get a really good seal when I screw the cap on. You know, you certainly don't want any leaks in these things. And I will say that I know I'm not supposed to have raced yet, and I'm not supposed to have used the buggy yet because I'm still building it. But I did because, well, I built this a little while ago. So, yeah, the shocks have not leaked, and they have worked wonderfully. They're very nice. Now, if you don't have a shock building stand, this here works perfectly. You can still reach inside the box to get to the shock shaft easily, to move it up and down slowly. What I usually do is I move it up really slowly, then I yank it down. And that kind of forces the bubbles out from underneath the piston. And then you kind of tap them, and then you just let them sit there for a while. And that'll bring the bubbles to the top, and you top off the oil as you need. Now, it's important, since the shocks use a different weight oil, front and rear, that you make note of which shocks are the front shocks, which shocks are the rear shocks. So I've got the 2 shocks on the right, and then the 2 shocks on the left. And honestly, watching the video, I don't know which ones are which. But I did then. So now I'm going to vibrate the box a little bit, just to try to get the air bubbles in the oil, if there are any left, to come to the top. I know we talked about the way the emulsion shocks work is that it mixes with air and all this other stuff, but you know, it's important to have the controlled amount in there. So you don't want any air bubbles sitting at the bottom of that shock. And because if you have air in one and you don't in the others, well, as you can imagine, when you're done building the shock, they're not going to be the same. So it's very important you get the air out. I'm just going to top off the oil here before I put the caps on. Just going to make absolutely sure that there's no air in there. Top off again. All right, so these are the tools I was talking about, and they work great for getting a nice tight fit. Now, I'm going to slowly, it doesn't look like I'm doing slowly, but if you can imagine, this is like 350 times speed right here. And so I am really slowly pushing down. And once you get to the bottom of the stroke there for the shock, you do not want to release pressure. You don't want that shaft to come back out before you get the screw in that cap, because then you'll just suck air in. Now, I should note that you saw the oil come out of the shock cap there, and that's important. If oil doesn't come out of the shock cap, well, then you really don't know where the level is at. So if there's no oil that squeezes out of the cap, then you need to disassemble the shock and put more. See the oil just barely come out right there, or kind of ooze out. Yeah, you'll need to disassemble the shock and put more oil in it, so that way you can know for sure that you've got the air out. Okay, so now pay close attention here. You'll notice that no oil actually comes out of that hole. Now I'm thinking, what? So what I did is I had to disassemble the shock, put more oil into the shock, and then try again. Like I said, it is important that you have some oil come out of there. That way you know what level you're at. I mean, it's actually best if you just barely have some oil come out at the very end. That way you're not wasting oil and making a huge mess. But all right, well, we finally have all 4 shocks built. Let's go ahead and put these bad boys on the vehicle. All right, so putting the shocks on the buggy, the top of the shocks go on. They feel pretty loose on there. However, there's not really play up and down to where it's going to affect the suspension. It just kind of wiggles, you know, front to rear, if you will. So it's not really affecting the suspension. But it just felt a little weird that it was so much play. I usually like to tighten them down until there's like no play, and then I'll back it off just a little bit. But in this case, the way the top spring perches there were designed, it just allows a lot of play there. Like I said, it doesn't seem like it'll affect the suspension or dampening or anything like that, because it's not in that direction. It's not just loose on the ball, but it can slide kind of front to rear. Well, thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out the last video, video 4, and we just put some finishing touches on the buggy, and I just gave a quick summary of what I thought. Thank you, and please like and subscribe, and check out the full article at rctech.net.